We have not had too many guests on our podcast who are not part of the player sphere. However, I have seen this man on video play tennis before. Yeah,
I thought all that footage had been destroyed, Mike.
I thought it was against Ricky. Is that right, Ricky?
Oh, maybe. Okay, that one's not so bad. Yeah, that rookie footage is not so bad. Yeah,
but
there's one really awful video of me playing with Carl Bialik.
Oh wow!
At Indian Wells, actually, because they set up a demo play site court, like early play site days, and so we were just there, and he wanted to do a story about what it's like and do a little, I think, article for whoever he was writing for at the time about what it was like, and he grabbed me to go play, and I had not played at Indian Wells before. No one will know like the altitude there and stuff, and the air just being really thin. I hadn't played in like a year, also not swung a racket in like probably about a year, and it was just the worst times I've ever played in my life. And what's luckily you can't see on screen, but I could see in person on the next court over, was a very intense shirtless hitting session between Dominic Thiem and Jordan Thompson. Just like world-class stuff, like,
world-class shirtless.
And there am I, like, struggling to push the ball like into the court, not have it go 50 feet long. It was a low point. And so that was on YouTube for a while, but has been taken down. Not by me, I promise, but I'm thankful to whoever did it.
So that is our guest, Ben Rothenberg, joining us, the co-host and host. I no challenges remaining.
Host is fine.
Yeah. And Ben, he does stuff for the New York Times. He's a very dominant Twitter personality in the tennis Twitter sphere. We have three topics we're going to get to here. So first, I know you are the lone one of the three of us headed down to Australia in the next couple of days. Walk us through what your preparations have been like, what you've had to go through before we start getting into the expectations of what's going to actually happen over the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's been something where I wanted to go and just wasn't sure about if it would be possible. It winds up actually happening at the time. It's only sending one staffer because it's the impending Winter Olympics coming up in 2022. So they're doing a little less travel to Australia, have more staff available to do preview stories or just to do that other long haul trip to Beijing. So we'll see how that Olympics goes. And I know that relates to one of our topics later on. But yeah, so I decided to go basically in early November. And then I got messages once I told Tennis Australia, like, hey, I want to come. They said, oh my gosh, you got to apply for all these visas. And deadlines are in 48 hours. And so I had to do all this stuff, much longer applications than usual. Had to get a sort of different sort of visa. Usually I just get the one you can kind of get on your phone as you're in the check-in line at the airport in the US. But this time I had to get some fancy one to send like bank statements and all this other personal information to Australia. That was weird. But anyway, so I'm I leave, we're recording this on the 28th. I have to get my COVID test on the 29th. It's the day before leaving, and then get on a plane on the 30th. So I was like very much not doing anything for Christmas gatherings at all. And had the excuse of just being like, I have to test negative on the 29th. Otherwise my whole trip gets screwed up. So I'm going to be in Melbourne the whole time. There's warm-up tournaments there this year, which will be different. So I'll be there for the 250s and the men's and women's 250s there, and then qualies and then main draw. So it should be different. It's interesting. I didn't go there in 2021 this year. So I didn't do the whole 14-day hard quarantine thing, but it'll be nice to be back after a couple of years missing there.
So it seems like this whole Omicron situation has escalated in about, I don't know, like 6 hours. And within a week, I'm being in New York right now, I'll be in South America tomorrow, but it seems like it literally has exploded. Have you heard anything along those lines of quarantines now being in place, shutting down? We know how conservative Australia is, with certain things like that, but how has that been so far?
Yeah, no like official rule changes. Actually, my airlines, I'm flying via Fiji because that was the commercial flight available. So Fiji, even just as a stopover location, they tightened the window in which you had to get tested. So for Australia, it was get tested within 72 hours of departure. Fiji, it was 24. And so I had to get a much more expensive test, honestly, with a faster turnaround in order to oblige the Fijian rules, as one does. So that's sort of been my impact in terms of things tightening, and obviously just me being way more cautious about, basically bailing on Christmas dinner and stuff I would have done probably otherwise because of Omicron. But I haven't heard anything official from Tennis Australia about more intense quarantining. And honestly, I'm kind of just going to cross that bridge when I get there. Like when I get there, they're like, oh, you can't leave your, a hotel or apartment for a day. I'll be like, okay, I'll just hang here.
Right.
And wait for. I know I have to get a test when I land. I know that, But then I think I'm okay. But I've heard also from people on the ground, and I don't know if you're hearing this too, Noah and or Mike, that like tests have been not ready, or people have been not having the tests as easily accessible as they thought they would upon arrival in Australia. So I'm kind of, again, leaving that on the other side of the world mentally and physically for now. And when I cross that equator, I will get there.
Yeah, but it's one thing how it impacts you, Ben. It's another thing how it's impacting the Australian people who have obviously been through so much, and then all of a sudden you have all these internationals who are just coming in and seemingly kind of hopping off a plane, and 2 days later they're out, 2 or 3 days later they're out in the general public. I guess I'm wondering how you are sensing the impact and what it's going to be in terms of, I don't know, the crowd or even just the political implications down there.
I mean, it's obviously been a huge political story in Australia, the tennis, and especially I think even more in 2021. It hasn't ramped up quite as much this year, although there has been all this debate and publicly about whether or not there'd be exemptions for players, and that's still going on. There's still one notable player who we're not totally sure what his status is, and we'll have to wait and see if he gets on a plane or off a plane in Australia
Tommy
or what.
Paul.
Not Tommy Paul. I did see that the ATP put out something saying that 95 of the top 100 were vaccinated.
Right. I saw that too. Yeah.
So that's when you get to the sort of guessing game of who the 5 are. That's a manageable number to try to figure out who they are. But anyway, I'll leave that sort of detective work to Noah. So I know in January and February when they were doing the last Australian Open that the Australian attitude was we want to be at 0 cases nationwide, and they did have weeks of being at 0 cases nationwide. And if there was 1 case in the state of Victoria, that was like, oh no, we screwed up. We have 1 case, which is completely off the charts in terms of what we're used to in America, is accepting as being normal numbers. I don't think they're there anymore. I think Australia has a steadier stream of cases that they're having, and they kind of given up on the COVID 0 thing, and they have Omicron down there already, and it is making moves as it does. In Australia, but they also have very, very good vaccination rates in their population, definitely better than we have here in the US. So, but it'll be interesting to see on that front, like what the confidence of the public is to turn out and show up to tennis and do leisure activities, even in a outdoor space, technically, especially if you're on outer courts and stuff. But if you're in if you're in Rod Laver Arena, it's sort of half indoors, half outdoors, and you are tightly packed with strangers if it's at 100% capacity. So I don't know what people's confidence will be. And it's also about how much people are willing to travel to the tournament. That's one of the things that happened in 2021.
Indian Wells.
You saw, but you saw people, if it's no longer a destination tournament, just the locals are not going to fill the stadium, even in the Grand Slam, and they did have some restrictions on capacity at different times during that tournament. But yeah, it was just, the visuals did not look like the Grand Slam in the crowd. And it was a little bit different than the US Open previously had been, where there was no one there in the 2020 US Open, and you were sort of used to that. But sort of having a meager showing is almost sort of, in some ways, feels worse. It's like it's here and people don't want it. I don't know. So we'll see how. I can't judge the Australia. That's something I'm curious to see there, what the Australian people's confidence is, and even like for these warm up tournaments. I like in 2021, those did not do well attendance wise. Like big name players, Serena Williams, whoever else, Djokovic, ATP Cup, and the 3 WTA 250s that held on the grounds those weeks before the US Australian Open. Not good crowds at all. So I'm curious to see what the appetite is, because they're not having. Maybe they will have at least domestic travel. People come over from Sydney to watch the Australian Open, which wasn't happening much last time. So we'll see.
Do you think the possibility of hard quarantine, where I guess the times are changing now. Now it's 5 days possibly, and then 10 days, but possibly remove the women's and men's 250s, have that hard quarantine to make sure that players are okay and everybody feels safe? Do you think there's a possibility for that, or at this point it's, we're there?
I think the cat's
I don't
out.
think they're. I haven't heard about that. I haven't heard about them canceling the warm up tournaments. But we'll see how flexible they're going to be. I mean, certainly the Australian Open is the priority, and the other stuff can, kind of get moved around, including qualies. We'll see if things do get rough there. But also, I think they're just sort of it's a tougher mandate this time, because and Craig Talley has said repeatedly, this year has been tougher to plan for than last year, because there's more sort of gray area this year. There's a lot more people by factors of probably almost like close to 10. With all the qualies players, much more teams available to come. There was no qualies last time, right? And for Australia, it was offsite. It was in other countries. Yeah. So it's going to be different. And then, like, what happens if the tournament has 8 players test positive?
That's my big concern.
What is the threshold? What is sort of the comfort level of where's the circuit breaker? To say, like, okay, this is enough. We got to cut this off. and shut it down. I don't know. I'm guessing just with how much Omicron is in the world, there'll be more players testing positive before they get on their planes. I'm not sure how many of those we'll hear about, but so many, obviously all the Abu Dhabi players, it's a rough break. Andy Murray seems to have somehow survived that one.
No.
But yeah, six Abu Dhabi players out of like a total of 9 tested positive. So incredible success rates for coronavirus there. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes and which players do pull out if anyone are still on the vaccine fence. I've heard about one player who is still on the entry list that I know of who says he's not going because of vaccine rules. I don't know if it's public. I don't know if that's public yet, but we'll see. I don't know. There's not gonna be many. There's obviously 95 top 100 apparently, so it's one of those 5. And then obviously, yeah, the Djokovic thing is so exhausting. I don't know when this will post, and I also don't want to talk about it too much in case he makes an announcement finally. But just like the stringing it out, it's just not fair to anybody. It's just like it sucks. It's exhausting, and you have to cover it because he's such a relevant guy, and he's the guy in Australia, especially. And it's going for the record, and it's number 1, and da 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 da. Just come on, like it's so tiring.
We're gonna Noah had his own incident with the Novak fans a good year ago, and so we're gonna just let him.
And if it's just me, and then you add Ben on top of that,
they don't love me, but like it's I also like I pick my spots with Novak probably more than most people just because of the backlash and how mean the Djokovic fans can be, for lack of a better word. But like this is ridiculous. Like the fact that we don't know if the number 1 player in the world is playing the next Grand Slam, because he will not make it clear whether or not he's on board with this vaccine program that 95% of his peers are. I mean, he might be one of those 95. We just don't know. The ambiguity of it, the sort of soap opera of it, that he's dragging it on and on and on. I don't think it's good to his fans either. I don't think his fans would appreciate it. If they're like, I've heard from a couple, they're like, we want to know if our guy's playing Australia. Right. This is not fun for us to be on.
Yeah, it makes no sense at this point. What the week, the 2 weeks? What are you fighting?
The only thing that rationally works for me is just that he is working to get the medical exemption.
Yeah, like he's constantly trying to go behind the scenes and constantly trying to tank something out.
That's the only thing that makes any type of sense as to why he hasn't announced it.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be shocking to me if it was still that down to the wire.
I agree.
Also, like I've read the medical requirements. I cannot imagine that a number 1 in the world athlete meets these requirements on any level. Honestly, from the things I've seen, I don't know his history. And I know there's lots of things about medical privacy, and this comes up during WADA stuff, obviously too.
Yeah,
like,
right.
And, TUEs, and you don't want to reveal people's medical situations. But like, I'm pretty confident that Novak doesn't have any of these conditions, largely which would lead you bedridden. In the year after he got 3/4 of the way, or 27/28 of the way to the calendar slam. I think he's doing okay health-wise. I don't know. It's just exhausting, but it's relevant. Like I can't not mention it here, but it's relevant, but it's exhausting.
It's also moving on to our next topic, but it also does tie in. It has gotten relatively quiet on the Peng Shuai front right now, and that does surprise me just a bit, considering how much of an Asian tie-in there is with this particular slam. This one being the closest to the Asian continent, and I'm wondering where we're at, where you're hearing we're at with that. Will there specifically any knowledge of anything happening in Australia specifically in that regard, so that there might be some sort of statement, whether it be on court or off court, from the Australian Open?
The statement's not going to come from TA, I don't think. I think TA has pretty carefully picked its words. And like you said, they have branded themselves as the Grand Slam of Asia Pacific. Yep. Actually, not even that close geographically. Like I think actually distance-wise, I saw this when Li Na won the French Open, that there was a map that someone drew that said like Paris is actually as far from Beijing, pretty much almost identical as Beijing is to Melbourne. They're just on the same, they're similar time zones. They're
right.
Similar, like there are cultural reasons that they actually are pretty close in certain ways, and the time zones being a relevant one actually. So I don't think they're going to do it. They also have a lot of big Chinese sponsors. This 1573 Arena, which is one of their only sponsored arena, I guess, name right now, is named after a Chinese company, some sort of Chinese liquor company. And plenty of other Chinese sponsors too. They don't want to do anything. Now, will we see a situation where, will there be a situation where there's player protests? I mean, maybe obviously like Nicholas Mahut's taken lots of opportunities in the last couple months to do things on this front. Generally, players haven't been doing this. There's been lots of opportunity in Melbourne actually with the Market Court Arena and all those things. And active players really have not been the ones taking those opportunities to make stands. The Peng Shuai stuff has resonated a lot with players, and they see her as one of their own, and they see the stuff. And obviously WTA has been really getting worldwide praise and acknowledgement for its really uniquely bold stand, stubbornly standing up to the Chinese state media censorship and everything like that. So I don't know. And there's a bunch of stuff going on. And there's also like Chinese players there.
Right.
That's one of the things I'm sort of nervous and curious about is what happens to the Chinese players. And there are a handful of them in the top 100 for the women, and a few others in doubles and qualities and stuff like that. Are they going to be able to play? Are they, will people, I would like to write a story about them, honestly, the phenomenon of what happens to these players now. And it's like, if women's tennis is on the outs in China, like, are they still going to be able to keep their careers going? I don't know what's going to happen with them. A lot of them I've noticed actually been playing a lot of the 125s that have been happening in December. Like they're just staying on the road away from China. They're not going home, just sort of, roaming away. So it's going to be interesting to see how a lot of this shakes out. But I mean, Noah, you can answer this as well. Do you expect sort of players to raise this as an issue too? Have player consciousness moved on from this? We'll see.
I don't. I mean, I think the biggest issue lies here, and it's not an excuse by any means because they're completely separate, but there's so much to worry about right now for players. They're worrying about getting into a country, they're worrying about testing positive, and there's a billion things. I don't think this is at the forefront of their minds right now, and it is an issue. You talked about Margaret Court. You see how quickly something gets swept under the rug. Tennis players are innately selfish. That's how it works. I think, early on in this situation, we probably saw the most, players actually coming together, and uniting more than ever before. But again,
I think it was already remarkable what the players did. Like that's my main takeaway with the Peng Shuai stuff. This is the most sort of united the tennis players have been pretty organically, standing up for one of their own, standing up for a cause, making statements, some of which were pretty careful. A lot of the statements didn't mention China, for example, but really, standing. It was a good moment of community solidarity for tennis, which doesn't have many of those really publicly facing anyway. Of looking out for each other and standing up and sort of putting people above profits. There was a lot of positive stuff about it. So even if it's not a big story in Melbourne, the fact that it was a big story, and like a worldwide front page story, like not just a sports story on any level, for so much of November and so on, I think it's already something tennis can be proud of. But yeah, it's not done.
I guess from a journalism media side of things, what was the initial reaction from yourself and peers after the ATP released their statement? I'm just curious from your side of things, what was the knee-jerk reaction?
I was not probably too different from what the players who spoke about it were saying. There's just not a lot of there. And the remarkable thing in terms of breaking with the norms is one of the WTA response has been. Right. In some ways, it's normal, saying we care about our player. We're going to put her safety and her story, which she put out, and our concerns for her ahead of profits. But it's so rare in the world of corporations, including sports corporations dealing with China. NBA has had a couple of moments like this. Nothing at sort of personal safety stakes the way the Peng Shuai is, just on profits. Putting those ahead of sort of human rights issues like Hong Kong or wherever else Daryl Morey was getting involved in. That was Hong Kong related. So I wasn't surprised by ATP, but I do think it's this big test for like this whole Tennis United movement, which is making movements in some ways. There are parts of it that are happening, like behind the scenes. There's consolidation of, I know from like the communication side, there's more joint press releases. There's like cross-posted articles on both websites, like content like that, which might seem really minor, but was never coming close to happening. Like there's conference calls happening from the two tours regularly now. They're trying to, share resources, a lot of which is cost cutting, honestly, during the pandemic at its core. But this is a real, and there's some major culture clash there, between the tours and how they deal with certain issues. Like, their Pride Month, for example, visibilities were very different between the two tours. So something WTA relatively recently has become comfortable doing and embracing as part of their legacy, and all the famous LGBT women and pioneers who were female tennis players, and men's tennis does not touch that. It doesn't think it's part of its brand or whatever. It just doesn't want to go on that flavor. So yeah, this is a real test, and we'll see. I think that the way the WTA left it, I don't think there's going to be any concessions. I can't imagine they're going back to China in 2022. I can't imagine what the thaw would look like. And then does the ATP go back? Then do they still hold the Shanghai Masters? I can't imagine that would be popular with the players. So I don't know. I just think that the whole sort of this era of ATP has been characterized by, you know, a culture of sort of silent I guess, I mean, cowardice is the obvious word, but it's a little harsh, maybe.
It does feel harsh to me.
Let's go. I mean, but not standing up for stuff, right? Like this goes to like topic we're not gonna get too much into, but like this Zverev stuff taking 11 months to acknowledge that these accusations have been made after they've been made. Like, you know, the Peng Shuai stuff obviously being way behind. And that is a WTA player. That is an auxiliary issue from them on some level. It's not their player, not their constituent. But like, it would be nice to see them be more proactive and show a little bit more attention to stuff, because there does seem to be player dissatisfaction separate and apart from any sort of PTPA, you know, real separatist movement that's brewing. You know, just the sort of general job approval ratings seem to be not great right now.
We've got to get Vasek back on the podcast, which at some point. So Ben, I did want to have this discussion with you, and I even mentioned it to you, I think in New York, one of the nights we were just kind of chatting in New York. The idea,
so nice seeing in New York, by the way.
I know, it was so nice. And then I got to hang out with Courtney a little bit in Indian Wells, and I was just like, oh my God, my people, I feel so comfortable. I don't have to hang out with Noah. Sorry. Journalism versus having a social media personality. Is kind of the.
Hold on one second. One second. I can't hear you. 1 second.
Check. Hello.
I can't hear you. Sorry, my headphones stopped working.
Okay. Noah, you can't hear Noah?
Hello.
Noah can hear me.
Hello.
You hear me?
I hear. Yeah.
Okay.
All
Ben
right.
doesn't hear me.
Let me try this again. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened. Sort of Bluetooth disconnect sound in my ear. Let me try this again.
Think I can hopefully hear you now?
Yes, you just sound awful.
Now it's better?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. So the
right when you mentioned Courtney is when I stopped. My computer just gave up.
Okay. Yeah. So when we were talking in New York, I mentioned this thought that I had, because you tend to be a rather polarizing figure in tennis. I've gone to the Reddit tennis forum once or twice.
Oh God.
It's just like, oh my God, there is a lot of dislike of Ben Rothenberg on that little Reddit subreddit, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
You, as a journalist, is one thing. I think you as a personality, if you will, on the Twitter side, social media side is another part. When I went through journalism school, and I'm a few years older than you, you know, we always had that idea of balance and really kind of taking yourself out of stories, etc. Right? I mean, we were, to use the Fox News slogan, "We report, you decide." I mean, ultimately that
balance.
Is that's how it was supposed to be when we, you know, when I learned in journalism school. You obviously are able to write very good pieces about tennis, right? That's obvious. But then you come in with this social media side, very opinionated, to getting to the point where people aren't able to really access some of your stories even and engage with your stories because of this social media personality. And I guess I'm wondering how you combine those two, why it's important for you to have this social media side, and as opinionated as it is, and really how you balance those two things.
I hope it's not as big a disconnect as you're making it seem like for people. Like, I hope that I'm not as alienating, that I'm really off-putting to that many people. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm. I don't know. I mean, I certainly understand there are people, like, even I remember, like, I think it was on your show, we had Chris Eubanks on at some point, and he made some joke about me. And like, I've barely met Chris Eubanks. Like, and I was like, oh wow, like I'm suddenly like a punchline to Chris Eubanks in some way. That's weird. But I like him because he bullies Noah. So
yeah. I will interrupt quickly and say it is spoken about. Your name goes around the locker room, and it's more possibly and probably, and whether this is flattering or not, more than you think. It's especially in the past 2 or 3 years. And I think that is what Mike is getting at, is this understanding that, you know, whether you think something is an opinion or not, which
I can give you a definitive example.
Sure.
I can't remember exactly who it was in Indian Wells. It was a media member who had not read your story about Zverev.
Okay.
Because it was you.
Okay.
That's I guess kind of what I'm getting at. How you kind of, have you ever worried about that, I guess?
No, I can guess who you're talking about, and I'm not worried about him.
I don't think that's actually who it was, but go on.
Okay. We'll debrief after. But no, I really don't think that's, it's unfortunate to hear that. I don't think that's a major problem. I think that's kind of within a pretty small bubble of people. And I think it's also a testament to just how sort of like out on my own I am in terms of like sort of this Zverev stuff, like doing a lot of this kind of reporting of being critical, of putting things out there that the establishment is not going to like or appreciate, and being independent, and being undaunted on things. Like, and yeah, there's some points I'm sure where it's great in people who like, love best of 5 matches, to use the obvious most common trope for people who think I'm a broken record and stuff, which I actually like didn't mention as a sort of like challenge myself during all of Wimbledon. I think it was, didn't mention it, but still getting their marks, not sort of, but also like for more extreme stuff, like let's say like the whole idea of like journalism and neutrality, I think it's very much up for discussion right now in the world. Yes. Certainly during the Trump era, this was a big conversation of how political reporters should cover this person who's breaking all these norms, and the political movement behind him that was breaking all these norms, like the Peng Shuai situation. Like, what would neutrality look like covering that there? Well, there's confirmed WTA, but China says she's fine. These things cancel each other out. Like the end, like that's how it would look like under traditional rules. So I think I did not go to journalism school. I did not. I'm relatively self-taught. I've had, some mentors and people I've looked up to, obviously, and worked for a lot of great places and great editors and gotten a lot of guidance and stuff. Not different degrees of hands-on, hands-off along the way. But yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going, but I think there are certain times where I stifle my opinion a lot more than people probably think I do in terms of what I tweet and don't tweet. And if people find it off-putting to, say during hour 4 of a, men's match, like this is too long, like this is screwing up the schedule. It's 1 a.m. The stadium's is 5% full. What are we doing here? If that upsets purists, like, okay, fine. And if it, means that certain like agents, for example, are afraid of me, that I'm going to like expose their player and don't give me interviews sometimes. Okay, that's fine. I'm not sure. I honestly, like, I think that at some point I should have a certain, if I'm doing my job correctly, I should have a certain expiration date on this beat. I shouldn't be set to be like a lifer and just be cozy with everyone and always trying to, just accrue access and not do anything with it. So hopefully, I'm not sure where exactly I'm going with this, but I don't feel a lot of the sort of like, I know I've seen Reddit. I've seen people say on Reddit, people on Reddit hate me deeply. But also I just don't think they know me. As much as that's like a sort of like thing to say on Jerry Springer, like, you don't know me, you don't know me. Like, I also just like genuinely sort of believe it. I'm not getting a lot of journalists who I respect saying things critical of me. Again, I'm curious who this Indian Wells person is. If it's the person I'm guessing,
I think it is actually, as I've been thinking about the
yeah.
I think the largest difficulty, the largest difficulty with this situation is, and the reason why you've created such an amazing pathway for yourself within the world of tennis is because it's so small. So when somebody wants to put a face to a topic, to a movement, it's your face. And that's because,
True.
There's respect to that. There's also the negative, and believe me, I get 1/100th of the hate you do. And I'm like, God, I'm enough of this shit. I'm not saying Novak's name ever again, but again, this is why when your name is brought up, when we're talking about whether it's vaccines or this, and you are that person that players are bringing up now. So I just want you to know that,
Well, it's good. It's good to know. I mean, like, I know, like, and, I'm even just like for certain things, I am sort of the, most sort of in some, maybe more used to be more, but like most classic sort of beat writer, kind of person who'd be like fastest out tweeting out draws to thing, like there would be players actually, like I've heard like stories like at the Australian Open 1 year, people like sitting in the locker room refreshing like my tweets to see like who they're playing first round, that kind of stuff. Like, and telling like other people like, you don't follow Rothenberg, you don't, like he has it like all like 5 minutes point. Like, well, what are you doing? And so those are sort of nice to hear, but also, it's a sign that that I am the big fish in this pond, shows how small the pond is. compared to a lot of sports. Like I just recently cracked 100,000 Twitter followers, like, and I'm like, this sport's like Adam Schefter theoretically, right? In terms of like scale, or I don't know, you know, Woj or whoever. Woj, by the way, who blocked me on Twitter. I still don't know what that's about. But you know, but it's a sign that like that it's, you know, that doing this sort of relatively day-to-day beat writer work stuff, it's still unglamorous, and it's still like there's not a huge following for me. And granted, yes, some people have unfollowed me. Thousands of people probably have unfollowed me in my time. But just, you know,
and it's only because you use the word golly every other tweet.
Yeah,
is that
golly
the only reason?
Heckin' golly, absolutely.
Big picture though, I'm reminded of our conversation when we talked to Mary Carrillo a couple months ago. There is the idea of that investigative journalism is kind of not in our sport all that much. It's pretty rare. So then when somebody is kind of breaking the mold, if you will, of how things have gone, I mean, it does create a lot of, I don't know, friction. So I think that's ultimately kind of where you're comfortable being, right?
It's not always comfortable. You know, like I still have to walk down the hallways of tournaments, which I haven't had to do in a couple of years. But I will in Australia, you know, be like, I wonder who's around this corner who I might run into. You know, what various 6'6" blonde person might be around the corner here.
The first person I ever ran into in Melbourne, true story, that little fellow right there.
Yeah, well,
so you know, not quite as terrifying. Yeah, not quite as terrifying.
No, but like, I mean, so there is sort of, I have a willingness to make things uncomfortable that people don't have. You know, like I'm willing to sort of, it's my personality for a while. Like I'll say things that people, you know, like won't be willing to say, or I'm just sort of less inhibited about that kind of stuff, I guess, which I think it is, a journalist is almost always a good thing. And yeah, there are times certainly where like I've, you know, there are a couple of little, like, you know, back in the day when like Nick Kyrgios and I would like back and forth a little bit, not very much, but a little bit on Twitter. Like those are not like my proudest moments as a journalist. I got some good burns in, but like, yeah. I mean,
you did get the podcast with him.
No, exactly. Like, and that was sort of, I was in that moment, I felt like I was speaking his language, or like interacting with him the way that he sort of understands. And it did work out to be something that did wind up actually in its own way being access giving, the sort of negativeness or adversarial thing with him. That's a unique situation. But anyway, yeah, like, I don't know. I like I said, I'm not doing this job in a way that make it easy for myself. But it's also the only way I know how to do it. Like I couldn't personally, you know, and to use this very stuff as an example again, like to have seen that stuff and be like, oh, well, okay, and scroll along and not try to find out more about that story, or not try to explain that story better to people. Like, honestly, the reason I, you know, contacted Olia in the first place, was that I'd read her Instagram post and didn't understand it super well and thought it was, you know, sort of muddled, and just wanted her to be able to better articulate and explain stuff in a way, and that was my goal. So yeah, and a lot of people don't make that sort of effort, honestly.
We're gonna end it there, mostly because Betty wants
to